It appears my husband has fallen under some devilish influence. I've made the decision to transfer ownership of this house to Susan. Should anyone oppose me, be prepared for the possibility of divorce. My husband intends to bestow our home, registered under my name, to the spouse of our eldest son, a true harpy who should vacate immediately. This conniving wife has manipulated my husband to her advantage, but I shall reclaim what's rightfully mine. I find it rather amusing, really. I can easily manage the monthly mortgage of $1,800 on my own. As it seems, even my eldest son has aligned with her. Well, I no longer hold any sentimental attachment to this decrepit abode. I shall relocate elsewhere. Rest assured, all three of you will face the consequences. Prepare yourselves. My name is Grace, and I am 60 years old. I hold an executive position in a prominent corporation. I reside with my husband, Robert, who is 2 years my junior. Just last year, we embarked on renovating our ancestral home in anticipation of our future. Built by my father, the house had aged considerably and required updates to accommodate our advancing years. However, due to our age and the extensive renovations, the loan amount is somewhat burdensome at $1,800 per month. However, the loan amount is well within our means, and I've been assured of its approval given my executive position in a major corporation. Interestingly, Robert, my husband, manages a small restaurant earning less than me, which seemingly facilitates my loan application process. Yet, solely relying on my income to repay the loan would pose challenges. Although the house originally belonged to your father and is now in your name, I can't help but feel guilty. Would you be able to cover the entire loan amount? In return, I'm more than willing to increase my contribution towards our living expenses. We jointly deliberated on the decision to renovate, and the transformation of our home is nothing short of remarkable. Its newfound beauty and comfort are almost surreal. Renovating the very house I grew up in brought me immense joy, fostering the hope of a lifetime within its walls. I never imagined the day would arrive when I have to bid farewell to this cherished home. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzes with a message. "I'm getting married," announces my eldest son, Jack, through the receiver. At 31, Jack holds a prestigious position as a section chief in a major corporation. He's always been diligent, immersing himself in studies and extracurricular activities, and his dedication has only deepened in adulthood. Despite his achievements, discussions of his romantic life have been scarce. Naturally, I found myself intrigued by the woman Jack intended to wed, a subject of much speculation. What manner of person could she be? If she has captured Jack's heart, she must possess remarkable qualities. Yet, a pang of concern gnaws at me. Could she be scheming, taking advantage of Jack's limited experience in matters of the heart? The anticipation and nerves swirled within me as we awaited the arrival of our son's significant other for the first time. Finally, the day arrived, and a poised woman with chestnut locks draped in a pristine white chiffon dress graced our doorstep. "I'm Susan, pleased to meet you." She greeted us with impeccable manners and a tidy appearance, leaving a favorable first impression. Flashing a brilliant smile, she extended her greetings to both Mom and Dad. Observing her, I couldn't help but feel reassured. Jack could surely be entrusted to her care. It seemed Robert shared my sentiments, his grin mirroring my own. "She's a keeper," he whispered in approval. Susan, catching his words, clasped Robert's hand and met his gaze earnestly. The intensity of the moment left me questioning her motives. What was she playing at? Taken aback by her sudden closeness, I instinctively recoiled, sensing Jack's own surprise, though Robert appeared unperturbed. While I harbored no feelings of jealousy, the encounter left an uncomfortable knot in my stomach. What are you doing?" I questioned, my tone tinged with uncertainty. "Thank you," Susan replied, her response doing little to ease my unease. Sensing Jack's discomfort, I directed my attention towards Susan, only for her to stammer apologetically, "Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have overstepped on our first meeting. I'm truly sorry," hastily releasing Robert's hand. I often hear that I lack awareness of personal space. It's never my intention to cause offense. I just end up doing it. I'm really sorry. Despite her sincere remorse, I couldn't help but feel taken aback by her behavior, a stark contrast to my initial positive impression. But Jack is absolutely smitten with her, even with her unconventional behavior. "You know," Robert interjected, his tone tinged with fondness. Susan's lack of personal space is actually one of her endearing qualities. She's the one who took the initiative with me despite my shyness around women. Thanks to her, I've been able to open up and envision a future together. Seeing Jack, who's usually quite introverted, transform like this, well, I trust him in your hands. Despite my initial reservations, I came to realize that Susan was indeed a kind-hearted person. With my approval granted, their wedding plans swiftly fell into place, culminating in a joyous ceremony just a few weeks later. From the depths of my heart, I wish them nothing but endless happiness. 6 months into their marriage, upon returning home one evening, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. A pair of women's shoes sat at the entrance, and in the living room, I found Susan. "Ah, welcome back, mother-in-law." She greeted me cheerfully amidst the scattered remnants of a drinking session. Puzzled by the scene, I couldn't help but inquire, "What's all this? Why the impromptu party without Jack?" Curiosity piqued, I sought an explanation. Well, on my way home from work, I ran into Susan. She expressed a desire to bond, so we opted for a drink. With payday still out of reach, we thought home was the best venue. Robert explained, his tone tinged with amusement. But why not include Jack in the festivities? And I wouldn't want to intrude on the newlyweds' privacy. They could have simply enjoyed a drink at their own place, I countered, tilting my head in confusion. It could have been fine at our place, but our home is a bit of a mess right now, Susan confessed, her words slightly slurred from the effects of the drinks. But why drink here together? Why not invite Jack? I pressed, puzzled by the unconventional gathering. Having a daughter-in-law visit her in-laws for drinks while they're newlyweds? It's a bit unusual, I remarked, scanning the room for any sign of Jack's presence. Jack's swamped with work, you know, and I've been pulling overtime shifts. It's just so lonely. Susan's voice cracked as tears welled up in her eyes. There, Susan. It's not your fault, I comforted, reaching out to console her. Jack is the one to blame for leaving his newlywed wife alone. Robert consoled Susan, gently stroking her hair. Oh, daddy-in-law, I inwardly cringed at the peculiar sight. It was all rather unsettling. Robert, remember your position. Susan is your daughter-in-law. Showing such intimacy is disrespectful to Jack. I reprimanded him firmly, hoping to steer him back to propriety. However, before I could say more, Susan interjected, "Please don't scold daddy-in-law." What? I couldn't help but express my bewilderment at her defense of Robert. Though I had much to say, the exhaustion from a long day at work left me devoid of energy. I'm going to take a bath. Please clean up, I sighed, retreating to the bathroom to seek solace. Resolved to address the situation, I dialed Jack's number to explain the bizarre turn of events. He insists he'll leave work immediately to pick up Susan. Understandable. Susan may be a tad eccentric, but Jack's willingness to drop everything for her speaks volumes about their bond. Still, I can't shake the feeling that life with her post-marriage might be a tad challenging. Despite my uncertainties, I resolve to offer Jack some marital advice when he arrives. Lost in contemplation, time slips away as I soak in the tub. Feeling a bit woozy, I make my way to the living room, expecting to find Jack ready to escort Susan home. To my surprise, Jack, despite being the designated driver, is indulging in a drink. Jack, you drove here, right? You shouldn't be drinking, I gently remind him, only to be met with a cheerful, tipsy response. Susan wanted a drink, so I thought we'd make a night of it, Jack explains, his words tinged with joviality. While I'm relieved my son will be staying the night, the presence of the daughter-in-law who's left a less than stellar impression gives me pause. Suddenly, a sense of bewilderment washes over me. Eh? I stammer, genuinely puzzled. But before I can protest further, Jack, already well into his drinks, interjects, "You know, I could drive you guys home." I don't want Susan to overstay her welcome. Despite my fatigue, I offer to chauffeur them home. However, Jack, ever the gracious host, insists, No, I feel bad. Why don't you join us for a drink? I'm rendered speechless. Something feels amiss. Suddenly, Susan flashes a mischievous grin. It's as if she's mocking my confusion. It's just my imagination, right? I try to convince myself it's a misunderstanding. Little do I know, her elaborate scheme has already begun unfolding. The following day, Susan returned, her apologies pouring forth like a flood. I'm truly sorry, she insisted before promptly leaving. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, as if a tempest had finally passed. However, Upon returning home that same evening, I found Susan once again present, with no sign of Jack in sight. A wave of despair crashed over me, though the circumstances differed from the previous day. I apologize for disturbing you once more, but I felt compelled to offer my apologies, Susan expressed, presenting me with a box of sweets. I got carried away. My mistake, Robert chimed in, his remorse palpable. While somewhat irksome, their display of contrition signaled a genuine effort to mend their ways. I forgive you. Thank you, I responded, sensing Susan's discomfort and appreciating their attempt at reconciliation. With that, Susan ceased her visits, sparing me further interaction. To be honest, I was relieved. I had no desire to engage with her any longer. Or so I thought, until one fateful day when Robert approached me with a solemn expression, signaling he had something important to discuss. As I pondered what it might entail and remained in the living room, Jack and Susan returned home. It's been a while, I greeted them, only to be met with silence. Perplexed, I wondered if they hadn't heard me. Suddenly, Robert's voice shattered the silence, declaring, I'm giving this house to Susan. If you object, we're getting a divorce. My mind reeled in disbelief. What was he saying? I couldn't comprehend his sudden proclamation. Mother-in-law, please leave, Susan interjected, her words plunging me into chaos. What? What does that mean? I demanded, my thoughts spinning. Hold on, why are you giving the house to Susan? I pressed Robert for answers, but his response only deepened my confusion. You've been bullying Susan all this time, he accused. Bullying? That's absurd, utterly baseless, I protested, struggling to make sense of the accusations hurled my way. But no matter how vehemently I argued back, Robert wouldn't listen, so shut up. Susan's words hit me like a slap in the face, explaining why she had been in tears, unable to return home until now. Robert's shouting only intensified, while Susan's tears continued to flow. How had things spiraled to this point? Suddenly, Jack chimed in, his voice laden with disbelief. I never imagined my mother would stoop to this. It's beyond messed up. The more I denied the accusations, the more enraged they became. Susan's tears seemed endless. That's it. I'm divorcing you. Leave now. I'm staying here with them, Robert declared firmly. Why should I give my house to Susan? I demanded, incredulous. In response, he shot back, because Susan is deeply hurt. Ordinarily, we demand compensation, but I believe there's a better way. By taking away your prized possession and giving it to Susan, it'll inflict the appropriate amount of damage on you, don't you think? I didn't bully her. Why should I be the one suffering? Besides, Susan quit her job when she got married. There's no way she can afford an $1,800 loan, I argue. Robert's response comes swiftly. Don't worry. We'll put the title in Jack's name. With his salary and his previous employer, we can make the change right away. Despite his assurances, I remained skeptical. Changing the title is no small feat, especially with the loan in place. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch. I doubt the bank will approve it, I counter. Robert, however, remains optimistic. You work for a big corporation, and so does Jack. We should be fine. Besides, I have a friend who works at the bank where you have your loan. I'm sure we can talk to him, and everything will work out. It's baffling where their sudden confidence stemmed from. That's right, an $1,800 loan is a breeze. Old Jack, emboldened by Robert's assurances, now stands firm in his conviction that I must relinquish the house. Despite my repeated protests, insisting I hadn't bullied Susan and thus wouldn't give up the house, they remain unmoved. Every objection I raise only ignites another heated argument. This is too much, I mutter, growing weary of the ordeal. Through her tears, Susan finally speaks up, her voice trembling with emotion. Mother-in-law, for the sake of this child, please, she pleads, gently caressing her belly. My heart skips a beat as the weight of her words sinks in. No way, Mom. Susan is pregnant, Jack interjects, dropping the bombshell. Given her fragile state, the stress might lead to a miscarriage. So please, reconsider, he urges. Stress during pregnancy is indeed a serious concern, but surrendering my home over baseless accusations seems unfathomable. I'm left feeling bewildered and conflicted. Please just leave me alone for a moment, I murmur, retreating to the bedroom, seeking solace from the chaos unfolding. Doubts gnaw at my mind as I ponder Susan's accusations. Have I unknowingly treated her poorly? I wonder aloud, sinking into the bed, consumed by worry. Then a sudden discovery jolts me from my thoughts. What's this? I gasp, spotting a strand of brown hair on the bedspread. Robert's and my hair are both jet black. There's no plausible explanation for a stray brown strand. Could this revelation hint at infidelity, adding another layer to our already tumultuous situation? My mind reels at the possibility, teetering on the edge of despair. I don't even know what's real anymore. I whisper, tears streaming down my face as I succumb to exhaustion, drifting into a fitful sleep. When I awaken, the room is cloaked in darkness, signaling that night has fallen. As I attempt to make my way back to the living room, voices drift through the air, indicating that Jack and Susan have yet to return home. I wish I could join in for a drink. Robert's voice rings out, brimming with enthusiasm. You can't, remember? You're pregnant, Susan reminds him, her tone equally fervent. Faced with their fervor, I find myself unable to intervene, resigned to the silent turmoil raging within me. Susan's cryptic accusations had left me in a state of despair, unable to bring myself to face the unfolding drama in the living room. Suddenly, the hushed tones of an intimate conversation pierced the silence. "Oh, Susan, I love you," Robert's voice murmured affectionately, followed by Susan's hesitant response, "Stop it, Robert. What if Jack or my mother-in-law finds out?" My heart raced with confusion and disbelief. What on earth are Robert and Susan doing? I muttered to myself, unable to comprehend the scene unfolding before me. Don't worry, Jack is passed out drunk, and Grace hasn't emerged from her room in ages. She's probably fast asleep by now. Robert reassured Susan, his tone laced with amusement. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. So they've been planning this all along. I realized, a surge of nausea rising within me. They kicked me out of my own bed to have their tryst with Susan, hidden from Jack. My home, a mere venue for their illicit affair, I concluded bitterly, feeling utterly betrayed. Fine, I'll let go of this wretched place. But mark my words, there will be consequences. The following morning, I feigned sleep in my room, pretending as though nothing had transpired. Truthfully, I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping in that bed any longer, and the shock of the previous night had rendered sleep elusive. Finally summoning the courage to relinquish the house, I declared, "I've decided to hand over the house." The reaction was immediate. A collective grin spread across their faces. "Fantastic, let's initiate the transfer of ownership right away," Robert exclaimed eagerly. "I'm sure I can secure a loan approval in no time," Jack chimed in, his excitement palpable. It pained me to see him so oblivious, but I refrained from speaking the truth to a son who seemed wholly under his wife's sway. "Not yet," I interjected, delaying the proceedings. In the days that followed, divorce procedures and the transfer of ownership consumed our time and energy. It was a grueling process, but we persevered, ultimately succeeding in changing the ownership. "From today onward, it's no longer your house," Robert proclaimed triumphantly. "Get out of here, old lady, lol." Susan's spiteful whisper sent a surge of anger coursing through me. "I'll leave, you don't have to tell me," I retorted, masking the hurt beneath a veneer of indifference. Surrendering the house I had called home for a lifetime was undeniably sorrowful, but it had morphed into a den of betrayal. Yet, I harbored no regrets. From now on, I'll turn the tables on these three in their twisted dynamic. They'll rue the day they crossed me, I vowed silently. Nearly a month after vacating the premises, I felt ready to execute my plan. Returning to my former home, I hesitated only briefly before ringing the doorbell. "What does a stranger want here?" Robert's voice, tinged with anger, greeted me even after all this time. "May I come in? I have something important to discuss," I stated assertively, unwilling to be dismissed so easily. "Why should I let you in my house?" Robert hesitated, clearly reluctant to entertain my request. "It's for Susan's sake, too. I have something important to share," I insisted, hoping to pique his curiosity enough to grant me entry. The mere mention of her name was enough to sway Robert, allowing me entry without hesitation. Though I felt a wave of disgust at the thought of invoking her name, I knew Robert's weakness for her, so I played that card. "An outsider is here," Robert announced, a term that stung, considering our former marital status. His choice of words irked me, but I pushed aside my irritation, focusing on the task at hand. "What do you want after all this time?" he demanded, the tension palpable in the room. "I want you to look at this," I replied, laying out the photos before them. "What? What is this?" Robert's voice betrayed his confusion as he studied the images before him. "These are," he began, his words trailing off as he recognized the figures in the photos, himself and Susan, captured on what appeared to be a date. In truth, since our divorce. I had enlisted the help of a private investigator to track their movements, resulting in these incriminating snapshots. "Just a moment. What are you trying to insinuate with these photos?" Robert's tone turned defensive, attempting to downplay the significance of the evidence before him. "We're simply a close father-in-law and daughter-in-law, nothing more, nothing less," he asserted, his words ringing hollow in the face of the damning evidence. "Yeah, why are you resorting to such underhanded tactics? What do you hope to achieve by presenting these nonsensical photos?" Susan chimed in, her tone laced with disdain. Despite their protests of innocence, I remained unconvinced. "Well, how about this?" I announced, retrieving my smartphone and playing a recorded conversation. "I really do love Susan. Hey, if you speak so loudly, Jack and mother-in-law will wake up." Robert's voice echoed through the room, followed by Susan's murmurs. "What? What's this?" Robert's voice trembled with disbelief as he listened to the recording. "Actually, the day I discovered your relationship, I had recorded your conversation," I explained calmly, though my heart raced with anger. "No, this is a misunderstanding," Robert protested desperately, his words falling on deaf ears. "What misunderstanding? This is clearly not acceptable," Jack interjected, his fury palpable. She kept her head down. I added, deciding to stoke the flames further. "Listen, I hate to ask, but who's really the father of that baby in your belly?" I pressed, watching as Jack's complexion turned ashen. "Is it with a dad?" Jack's voice quivered with fear. "No way, my father-in-law was pulling out every time." Oh, Susan's words trailed off, a realization dawning upon her too late. "You just admitted it, didn't you? You just admitted it." Robert and Jack erupted into shouts, their anger boiling over. In the chaos that ensued, they ended up wrestling with each other, their scuffle abruptly interrupted by Susan's cry of pain as a cramp seized her stomach. "I've been saying this all along, haven't I? I haven't been bullying Susan. Could it be that you were lying just to drive me away, to manipulate Jack?" I interjected, my voice laced with frustration. Jack recoiled in disbelief. "You're kidding." "What the hell? That's just messed up with you guys," he exclaimed, his trust shattered. Unable to trust even my own mother, I watched as Jack grappled with the betrayal, his sense of guilt palpable. "Now that you understand all this, spill everything," he demanded angrily, his gaze fixed on the two culprits. Reluctantly, they confessed, revealing, "We have enough evidence. Here, are we going to court?" The mere mention of the word court seemed to loosen their tongues, and they began to speak. Apparently, Susan initially loved Jack, but upon seeing our newly renovated and beautiful home during their marriage proposal, she grew envious. "My parents' house was pretty run down, and I was jealous of a beautiful house like this," she confessed bitterly. "The interior was quite nice too," she explained tearfully. It became evident that the woman who coveted a home like ours had meticulously orchestrated her plan to win over Robert on the day of the marriage proposal. So she intentionally ambushed Robert after his work without inviting Jack and brought him home. For several months, as Jack remained absent, she cultivated a relationship with Robert and plotted to push me out. "Then why not propose to live together from the beginning?" I questioned. She paused before replying. "I have a negative perception of mothers-in-law. At home, my mom and grandma fought every day because my grandma bullied my mom. I didn't want to subject myself to living with a mother-in-law. The only way to live comfortably in a beautiful house was to get rid of the mother-in-law. Indeed, with such a perception, living with a mother-in-law would be undesirable. But to pursue your father-in-law? What did Robert think about this?" I pressed further. I knew I was being manipulated, but when she greeted me with a smile, held my hand, Robert's admission trailed off, revealing his vulnerability. Despite being aware of being used, he seemed to have succumbed to her charm, choosing to abandon me to keep her by his side. "You guys, you're the worst." Jack's words hung heavily in the air as the two offenders hung their heads, tears streaming down their faces. Following Jack's natural decision to divorce, he opted to verify the child's DNA, revealing Robert as the biological father. "I won't pay child support," Jack declared, demanding compensation from the guilty parties. "Of course, me too. I can't believe I'm suing my own father for compensation," I consoled Jack, gently patting his head as he grappled with the shocking revelation. That deceitful woman had upended all our lives, but she would soon come to regret her actions more than any of us. My intuition proved correct. 2 years later, she remarried Robert, choosing to endure their union for the sake of their child. Placing their offspring in daycare, she resumed work. "Look, Daddy, Uncle came to pick you up today," she chirped to their child, unaware of the disapproving glances from other mothers at the daycare. The children seemed to be adjusting well, but she's struggling to connect with other moms, feeling isolated. When she attempted to explain her divorce and remarriage to her own parents, their fury was directed at Robert, leading to their estrangement. It's all a consequence of her choices. As for the house, Jack now resides there alone. I contemplated selling it, but couldn't bear to part with it, considering it's been Mom's home since birth, a repository of cherished memories. Despite my insistence that the house felt eerie after everything that happened, Jack couldn't bring himself to sell it due to overwhelming guilt. Perhaps influenced by my constant aversion to the house, Jack arranged for it to be professionally cleaned and cleared out of all remnants of Robert and Susan. Despite his efforts, Jack felt remorseful, acknowledging the pain he caused Mom. "Even though it was because of that woman, I did something terrible to Mom. I know you probably won't forgive me, but please visit me or come to the house on a whim, and let me show you some devotion," he pleaded, offering me a ticket for a hot springs trip. Though I'm not ready to forgive him just yet, Jack's remorse has touched me. I'm considering taking steps to rebuild our parent-child relationship to what it once was.